Alright, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Writer's Bookshelf. So today we're going to be looking at another book by Jordan Rosenfeld, which you may remember from last season. She co-authored Writing Deep Scenes with Martha Alderton. Today we're covering her solo book called Make a Scene, which is actually, I think, a second edition. She wrote the first edition about a decade and a half ago. Republished it with a new edition in 2017, so it's it's more in line with the writing deep scenes than it was previously. But essentially, what this book is, it breaks down the components of writing a book by scene, and that's important because the scene is what makes the book work. It's the piece to the entire composition that determines whether the story works. And the premise is that each scene is like a little mini story in of itself. So whether it's a scene is a page or 5-6 chapters, however long, it's all based on a sequence of events happening that have their own story arc from beginning, middle, end, and all of that. So what this book does is it breaks down all the components of scenes in order to show that it not only does it kind of match the total composition, but it also goes through some of the elements that you need for your scene to either work or be compelling, to get your reader interested in all of that. So I thought we'd take a look at what's inside the book here, other than the usual, like here's a nice graphic art, and here's the usual, here's what the chapter looks like, which I'll do just because it's tradition. If I can find a chapter, here's what a traditional chapter looks like. So there you go, the interior of the book. What's more important is not how it's designed, but obviously what it says. And I do think that this book is, it's definitely the kind of thing where if you're not familiar with scene structure, this is going to get you primed and ready. Do you need it instead of deep scenes? Or the Writing Deep Scenes book, I think you can probably use both together, just like you can use the Plot Whisperer with Writing Deep Scenes together. I think they all kind of work as a triangle of helpful advice to make sure you stay on track. But what I like about this book is it really breaks down not just the stuff that we think about, like with plot and all that, but even gets down to your senses, gets down to subtext. It's just a number of things. So what I thought we would do is go ahead and just quickly look at the different segments here. If you go to the part 1, part 2, part 3, you'll see that part 1 is the architecture of a scene, and this is essentially just the overall kind of blueprint. It reminds you that the scene is just another piece of the entire work. Just like the human body's got different pieces, like the arms got structure, the legs got structure, or if you think of a building, if you go to an office block, you expect to walk into the foyer or the vestibule, whatever you want to call it, the entryway where the reception hall is. That's typically the point of access to the main sections where the offices are. But that point of access where the reception desk lies has its own structure. Like, you wouldn't walk in and expect to see a kitchen, right? When you walk into an office building, there might be a kitchen in there somewhere, but that's not the first thing you expect. You expect to walk into, an area where you're greeted, where you're, have to sign a ledger, so you're, allowed to go through. You have to, pass through a checkpoint, show the security guard that you belong there, things like that. It's all structured pieces that we expect to find when we walk through. The scene is designed the same way. It's a part of the book, but that scene still has to follow certain components in order to work well. And if the scene doesn't have these components, and hence if it doesn't allow us to move seamlessly from that scene to the next one, if it doesn't connect to the next scene, if for any reason it feels broken or disconnected, then it won't work. And so this book is kind of helping you get the foundations and the grounding in order to ensure that you stay on point with the whole development. So the architecture, there's 4 chapters. There's functions of a scene, there's strong scene launches, powerful scene middles, and then successful scene endings. So to be clear, launches isn't like marketing. It's how the scene begins. Did you set it up properly so the reader is oriented to what's going on? Is your character present? Does it have all the necessary information for everything to make sense, and so on. Then there's part 2, the core elements of the scene. You have setting, which I admit that's one of my weaker areas. The setting, of course, tells us where it's taking place. If you don't fulfill the needs of setting, then obviously your reader is going to be lost. And actually, I think the chapter on setting is pretty intriguing, because I think let me just make sure I remember correctly. Yeah, she talks about setting the stage right here. There's in the setting section. You can see that, and certainly it gives us the geographic locations, the natural settings, houses, buildings, rooms, seating details, including time and history, cultural references, and it goes on. It again, it's a reminder of what does this scene need in order for the reader to be grounded, and then it goes into some examples, as most books do, examples from literature. So you can see that she goes into an example of natural setting and so on. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward there. So you get the senses is the next one. It's not just sight. It's you're integrating sight, smell, taste, touch, and then of course hearing. And it isn't a matter of saying Bob saw. It's just show us what you saw. Bob sensed. Bob heard. You don't need to say that. You can instead integrate sound cues, smell cues, taste cues, touch cues through the line. So something to the effect of the pizza tasted salty, rather than Bob thought the pizza tasted salty. So it establishes a connection to the reader's emotional core. Then you got character development and motivation. Obviously, there's no story if the character doesn't want anything. So that's something I struggle with personally. I know it sounds crazy, like what are you writing the story for if you don't know what the character wants? I think it's a struggle that is probably more common than we realize, because how many times have anybody asked you what you wanted, and could you give them a straight answer? You might say, I want a pizza. Well, that's not a story momentum device. Or you might, I want happiness. Again, happiness how? What do you think is going to give you happiness? Okay, how do you go after that? That's something more to the line of what motivation and desire and all that is. And sometimes it's difficult for us to articulate what that is, and so we sometimes we lean on the generic, and the generic does not work in a scene. Any scene that focuses on the generic is not going to be moved very well. It's going to seem aimless and all that. So we go through this chapter in talking about what the character wants and how to push them forward based on that motivation. And I think this would also go with villains. Again, I don't know if the chapter actually covers that. I can't remember. It says plot your character's emotional journey, and so that would include who they are, where they are, and all that. That's actually the next chapter. I skipped ahead. The motivation is chapter 7. Plotting the journey is 8. Yeah, sorry. Action, emotion, and theme would be the character development and emotion. You probably can't see it past my hand there. But yeah, one thing that's interesting, she says, is have at least one plot event or a new piece of information to react or respond to. It says you can have more than one if needed, but whatever you choose must unravel from the scenes that came before and drive the story forward by giving your character something to react to, which is where chapter 8 was going to come into. And yeah, it's a matter of the character wants something and you're going to show them how they're going to get it or not. So I spoiled chapter 8, plot and your character's emotion journey, and then after that is subtext. Subtext is an interesting one because we don't always think about subtext right away, so that might be more of a revision section. But the subtext is like the deeper meaning, like why does this scene matter? It's not about so much what happens, but why the thing that happens is important to the character, why the reader should care. And sometimes it's also the way the scenes are laid out. You might have symbolic stuff in there. So that's an interesting section to go through. Then you have dramatic tension. Every scene needs that. Scene intentions. And that's the end of part 2. So again, you can read those as you get to them. But as you can see, like with the elements of the scene, or more specifically the core elements of a scene, when you integrate all these elements together, you do give the scene its weight. You give the scene its meaning, and it's right to be there. How often have we thought of subplots that take the story nowhere, or even those plot threads that have no ending? That we start them and then we never finish them, and then we don't know why they're even there. Eventually we cut them out, and essentially we're looking, a scene would incorporate all the elements in order to belong, and have some bearing on the whole entire structure of the plot. So part 3, we have scene types, and that gives you a general overview of what the scene types are. And then what this is this is really just a breakdown of all the different types of scenes that make up the story. So that would be like your energetic markers, your climax, your inciting incident, the plot points, all the stuff we normally expect. So the chapters are broken specifically by the type. So you got excuse me, you got prologues, when to use them, why you should use them if you use them, and why you shouldn't use them if that's the case. Then of course the first scene, or the thing that launches the whole story, the contemplative scenes, what does it all mean, suspense scenes, the stuff that ideally will keep your reader turning the page. You have your dialogue scenes, that's your conveyance of information and showing character and all of that. Your flashback scenes, again, like prologue, do you need them? If so, how do you integrate them so they make sense? Climactic scenes is the stuff at the end, and then the epiphany scenes, which is sort of the aha moment of, oh, I get why this is important now, and not for the reader, but like the character has his or her epiphany scene. And of course the final scene is the last thing we see before the camera fades out. So it's all in its entire part 3. It takes up 100 pages of the book, so that's a good half of it is just devoted to the types of scenes. So if you look at, for example, dialogue scenes here, oops, I'm trying not to lose my place in the table of contents there. It shows you how to open a dialogue scene. It gives you an example of how dialogue works overall, the big reveals, interesting bullet points including the information must be earned. So if you're revealing plot information, you don't want just a contrived, guy in the street that just stops the hero at random, having no connection. It says, hey, you look like the main character of a book. Let me give you some important information that I've overheard while I was out there, trying to, carry my hat around. There's this bad guy who just spoiled his entire, plot in a monologue, and you should hear it. Like, it's ridiculous, but no one's going to ever do that. The point is the character needs to earn his information, as an example. And how does he do that? Well, that's up to your story, but hopefully it's not just thrown at him. Hopefully something he does generates that earning. So yeah, so that's the breakdown of the scenes. And then the last part 4, is other scene considerations. So they go into point of view, secondary and minor characters, what to do with them, scene transitions, how to get from one to the next. That might be difficult if we're inexperienced, or if we're not sure what the bigger picture has in store for our scenes. Moving from one to the other to show their connection or relevance could be difficult, but doesn't have to be, because ideally, the whole thing should have one continuous momentum. So hopefully, your scenes do naturally connect. And then the scene assessment and revision. So this is just when you go back and review whether it even works and if you have to make changes. And then you have your index. So that's the book. It's, again, another pretty straightforward writing book. I wouldn't go so far as to say if you read anything else, you've read this too, although I think at this point we probably learned that there's a lot of, when it comes to the craft books, there is a lot of overlap. And as I always say in every episode, the thing about overlap is you won't forget it. If you keep reading the same things over and over, at some point it's going to stick. Now, do you need to keep reading it? I mean, at some point it's for inspiration more than for education. It's, to go back and remind you why you even do this. And that's why I think the value is in a lot of these books, if you're at the stage where you've already read a bunch of them. But if you haven't read any craft book, I absolutely recommend it, along with Plot Whisper and then Writing Deep Scenes, as a sort of a trilogy of information. So definitely a good one. This is the remake. I don't know. I think the original came out probably late 2000s. This is the 2017 redo, and this comes after Writing Deep Scenes came out, because she references Writing Deep Scenes several times. And I think she might have referenced the Plot Whisper, if I'm not mistaken. Which again, if you've, I think last week would have been my video on the Plot Whisper. If you haven't seen it yet, you can check it out. It doesn't give any references to other books. Thought it could. But yeah, Making a Scene with Jordan Rosenfeld. I do have a couple more of her books on the queue for this series or season. I'll spoil those when the time comes. Not sure exactly when they're coming up the line, but they will be up the line at some point this season. I believe the next one I'm doing will be a genre book. I think it's gonna, yeah, I'm pretty sure the next one is a genre book. So if you've been waiting a while for those, stay tuned, because we will get one very, very soon, and very soon would mean the next episode, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm recording these ahead of time and potentially out of order, so I'm not quite sure if I'd settled on the genre book for episode 5 of the season, but I think I did. So if you've been waiting for that, stay tuned. But that's it for today. Hope make sure you like, subscribe to all the things YouTubers tell you to do. Let me know if you've read this book, if you like the book, if you recommend the book, if you will buy the book if you haven't read it yet. Let me know what you think of the series so far. Let me know if there's a book I haven't covered yet that you want me to cover. At some point I'm going to have to start building up a new list of possibilities. So if your preferred book hasn't been on there, say so. If you're the author of any of these books, please give me a shout out and say hey. I had a couple you did already, so thank you for those who wrote one of these books and decided to leave a comment. It's always nice to hear from you, and if you impart your advice, if you have something extra you want to share with the readers of this comments, feel free. But that's all. So thanks for watching, and have a good month. I guess. I don't know where we are in the calendar, but the next one, I'm trying to do these every first and third Friday now, rather than every Friday, just to give you all more time to get the books and read through them and then digest them and all of that. So hopefully that's working out. But again, let me know if it's not. I think that's everything. So if you haven't joined my mailing list yet, I'm always open to new readers, but remember, my mailing list is for readers of my book, not necessarily people looking for information on these books or tools. Doesn't mean I won't ever talk about them, but that's not really the purpose of my mailing list. So if you're here just for the tools, maybe hold off. But if you are interested in anything that I've written, please join the mailing list, because I would love to keep you all in touch. So that's it for today. Anyway, that's all. Thanks. Bye.